Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching this weekly Ag Weather Update brought to you by Farm Credit. First of all, a quick apology. Last week, as I was editing the briefing I put together for you, apparently the final version that got sent had the word demo mode scribbled across it, and by the time we discovered the error, it was just too late. I had already deleted the original files, and so I apologize for that. We got that fixed, and we'll make sure that that doesn't happen again. Okay, while I was talking about that, though, we need to discuss the pattern we've been in, the one we're going to be seeing here in the very near term, because this map shows you from April 19th through May 7th, average temperature ranks by climate district. And as you look across this map, we can see that really if you were east of the Rocky Mountains, we spent most of this time with below average temperatures. If there was warmer conditions, they were relatively brief, and overall we didn't see the temperatures really just spiking too much. We're going to see a pretty big changeover from the pattern that we were in that gave us that. And I just thought I'd give you just a little bit of meteorology of this pattern. Let's blow this up a little bit so we can see it a little bit better. There we go. The thing that we were watching is this. It's called an omega block, and this is where the atmosphere has this high kind of pinched just above two cutoff lows. Now, the most important thing about an omega block is that these two low pressure centers that you see here are completely closed. In other words, the air is completely circling around them, not opening up and continuing to move. And that is one of the things that just defines an omega block. Not only does it look like the Greek letter omega, but it doesn't move. And that's what a block does. Now, you might be going, well, why isn't this an omega block? Because the pattern never closed off. It was highly amplified, but it never closed off into tight circulation, especially with this ridge that opened into Canada. And this ridge in Canada here, I'm sure you saw this in the news, there were some very large wildfires over the weekend here in Alberta that were just sitting inside this massive ridge, which is just an indication of how dry things are there. Well, the good news is this is what the pattern looks like on Monday. It is opened. There is no more omega block here. We've now kind of positioned a ridge kind of in this vicinity, but this flow is coming across the country like this. Now, this is the mid-levels of the atmosphere, okay? So to see flow coming out of the west-southwest, typically in spring means we've opened up the Gulf of Mexico underneath it, and this returned a lot of moisture into this area. Now, just thinking about that, I really specifically want to talk about some of the major crops grown in the central United States, because when you look here just over this past weekend, this is the storms we've just seen in the last 72 hours. Well, Nebraska was in drought. Parts of Iowa was in drought. Parts of Missouri, Illinois were all in drought. And then, of course, we needed moisture, believe it or not, here in the northern plains because all that snow has melted. Remember, a lot of snowmelt just gets into the river systems and it doesn't exactly go to saturating the soil because it takes a while for the soil to warm up. So we needed the moisture in this area. So there's a lot of places that I imagine, woke up at one point this weekend and just felt as though they got $1 million or $1 billion rain. Now, the question is this pattern going to continue to do this? And when is that moisture going to get over here to the Carolinas down to Virginia? So I want to show it to you on Saturday here. On Sunday night as the sun was setting. And it's just amazing. Look at the size of these storms coming across Iowa, Illinois, into western parts of Kentucky, Tennessee. Then down in Texas, more hail, big storms in Nebraska. I mean, some of these storms are really just saving an early crop. But you can see how dry it is underneath this. So do you see this little fine line right here? In fact, let's just go look at this. Why not? I know it's in Oklahoma, but I think you might like to see this. See that? That is all dust from the outflow of this storm. Just amazing to see that dust getting kicked up. So that just tells us that underneath all of this, we still have a lot of drought in this part of the country. Now, where we currently see drought up the eastern seaboard, parts of Florida, we do see it in pockets of Georgia, pocket of South Carolina, getting up here into Virginia, West Virginia, this region. By the way, last week, parts of West Virginia saw over 30 inches of snow. But the thing that I need you to get is where we expect this moisture to be for the remainder of this kind of front half of the week is going to continue to work on some of this drought area here and start to really just revive these soil moisture problems in this area. In fact, I don't know if you can hear it outside right now, but I live over in eastern Illinois, and we've got storms going right now. Got 2¼ inches last night. So tomorrow, when the new map is released for May 8th, it'll show all of that rainfall that's come into this area. Now, we've got a freshly planted crop, so we're thinking about corn and soybeans that we, of course, grow over in this part of the country. Your competition is here, right? And so just to see this moisture coming in is quite critical. And here's where we expect things to be this week. We are drier from Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina. We'll see why in just a few moments. But you see that the Gulf is open wide, and we're going to see pretty good chances of at least picking up 1/2 inch of precipitation here. Now, it's not to say we are completely dry. There are chances for showers and storms, maybe some stronger ones here in this part of North Carolina this week. But as we just look at the map as it stands, the best way to describe the pattern, is just to watch it open up the midsection of the country. Now, normally when we see systems coming through the midsection of the country, they move or they propagate, they advect toward the east. But this particular setup is delivering weaker frontal boundaries to the east. So let's put all this in context. Let's look at the pattern, walk through the models, and then at the end of this briefing, I've got brand new long-range data, including a discussion on El Nino. So we're going to go all the way out through summer with the newest data that was just released. So here's what we've got. Here's the trough and ridge pattern through Tuesday into Wednesday and Thursday. There's the trough that's leaving. That was the one that sat over us for about a week. It's out. And what we now have is that right there. Now, the reason why this isn't getting over to North Carolina is this ridge. This ridge right here is quite protective of getting the flow to deliver moisture to North and South Carolina back down to Georgia. But it is just going to light up the central part of the United States. We then go out past this, going out to Friday into Saturday and Sunday. And I've noticed the models trending toward this. Highly amplified flow. And now we start to see us sitting back in the base of a trough. Now, there's a couple of things about this. This tends to bring drier weather to the midsection of the country. It tends to increase our chances of some precipitation in the southeast, but it's not by any means a wet pattern. If we want a wet pattern, park a big ridge here. Pump all that moisture in. That's what we would get. So this is not quite it. But going out here over the next week, this is where we tend to set things up. So to take a look at how this all plays out, let's start this at 6 a.m. on Monday morning. These are the complexes of storms that move through Sunday night. You can see them in two places here in parts of the Tennessee Valley and the Mid-Mississippi River Valley. And then throughout the day on Monday, we're going to have to watch for the remnants of some of these storms to make it through parts of Georgia. And then over in the afternoon and evening hours into North Carolina. Do you see that right here, North and South Carolina? Some of these storms may pack a bit of a punch. Okay, right now the Storm Prediction Center's got us out for a marginal risk. We're going to keep an eye on these storms again, Monday afternoon and evening in this area. But as we play through Monday night, getting into Tuesday morning, Tuesday afternoon and evening, there will be complexes of storms attempting to come down out of the north, out of Virginia, once we get into the pattern on Tuesday night. And that will be primarily because of the position of a front right in through this area. It stretches all the way back to Nebraska. Okay, so that moisture comes through. So you notice at the beginning of the week, on Monday and Tuesday, we've got chances for storms in the Carolinas. But where we take this from here, let's look at our multi-model analysis, GFS on the left, European model on the right. Now we've played through Monday, there it is, into Tuesday. You can see both models attempting to drag storms. I know you don't see it as well in the GFS, but it's here in the European model. They're going to drag some storms through this area. Now after that, we go through Wednesday. Much of the attention is going to come back to the plains. We have a drier Wednesday and Thursday overall for North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia. And then we get into the rest of the weekend. This will be Friday into Saturday. And then we'll notice that moisture that's just been pumped into the mid part of the country does start to move toward us early next week. Both models are trying to clear this larger front through us by the time we get into next Sunday into Monday. But the issue with this pattern is overall you distill it down into one map and you say the next 10 days, what are we looking at here? This is the European model 10-day forecast for precipitation anomalies. And outside of the storm complexes we've watched come through this part of North Carolina, much of the rest of North Carolina, South Carolina, and parts of Georgia are forecast to be drier. Now, you look at this map, and I want to make sure one thing's clear. This is not going to be accurate. And the reason is the pattern that's setting up has very, very weak frontal boundaries in it. It feels as though we made this jump into summer-type weather. And what I mean by that is weak fronts, weaker upper-level flow, which means storms give life to new storms. So that's why we'll be now casting our way through a lot of this next week to see the timing of these events coming through. But we can still look bigger picture at maps like this and also ones like this, which show you the probability of getting an inch of rain over the next 10 days. So notice that in parts of Georgia, South Carolina, and this part of North Carolina, these probabilities are down here in this 20 to 40% range. It's more along the coast, and it's more as you go farther to the west out of Georgia. But we're not looking at an overly wet pattern. There will still be storms. Some of you will get a lot of rainfall out of them. But we're looking for the broad soaking events. They're all in here. All right. Overall, Seeing a little bit of a drier pattern doesn't have me concerned. I know that in the southeast it feels as though we're always a week away from drought. But over the last 30 days, there's been quite a bit of moisture. We have one pocket down here in Georgia, which we saw that showed up on the drought monitor right there. See it? As being drier. But as we look out here overall, much of North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia and Virginia have had better precip in the last 30 days. All right, from there, what about week 2? Now, during week 2, this pattern is expected to go highly amplified and dive a trough in like this. That'll cool us back off, but not as cold as we were. A lot of convergent flow into this area. The wettest conditions will sit at the base of that trough, which means week 2 could have wetter conditions right into this area. We see that also getting us out there. Again, this gets out to the 21st. Even the GFS is picking up on that wetter pattern, then brings it back to Texas and the Four Corner States with drier in the interior. Now, we started off this video not talking about moisture. We just got through the next couple weeks. We started it off talking about the temperature pattern. With the omega block out, this is what we're seeing right now in terms of the accumulation of heat units, GDDs, over the next 7 days. And now look at Raleigh. We got 141. Come down to Atlanta, 161. Southern Georgia, 178 GDDs this week. So we're going to get heat back in the system, and I want to show you what it looks like by going to your high temperatures here. Now, this is what we saw on Sunday, so let's get into Monday here. Mid-80s, upper 80s, okay? Go into the day on Tuesday, same story. Into the day on Wednesday, 80 to upper 80s, cracking 90 in southern Georgia. Then we see a similar setup on Thursday, going into Friday and Saturday. This is what the temperatures are going to look like. So we've now seen the atmosphere shift the jet stream north, bring in much more spring and summer-like temperatures. And as we just stretch it out there 15 days, this is what we've got. This is a 5-day sliding window of average temperature anomalies. And most of the next 10 days, we are warmer than average, from Virginia all the way down to Florida. Now, as we go beyond this, we see that there's a little bit of cooler air trying to come in, in the 3rd week of May, maybe the end of the 2nd week into the 3rd week of May. And why this is happening is the atmosphere is trying to put a big ridge here and then dive into a trough that sits there. And that's just what it is. They're troughs of cold air. So we'll probably go back to just more seasonal temperatures. But overall, this is the pattern I think we're going to be setting ourselves up to seeing. Now, on Friday, the Climate Prediction Center released its newest outlook for the end of May, beginning of June. And they kind of just kept it. Do you notice that? There's the temperature setup, and there's the precip. So drier here, wetter in this area, and wetter back here in the Four Corner States. We have a lot of questions about this because I know that the National Weather Service would agree with this. There's nothing about this pattern that's settled. None of us right now are enjoying making these week 2 to week 6 forecasts because they are very, very low in accuracy and skill right now because of just how much things are moving around. To give you an example, we think about what the European model says. Notice it's wetter for New England. It's wetter for Virginia, North Carolina. It's near normal for South Carolina, parts of Georgia, but very dry in the interior. And that kind of looks like the previous forecast, but doesn't make full sense because at some point when we start getting in these warmer months and there's northwest flow coming into the midsection of the country, this actually initiates a lot of storms, and they tend to carry all the way to the East Coast. So I think right now, this intermediate time frame from now to about June 16th doesn't have a set pattern about it. And I think there's a lot of things we can look at to try to understand that. And I think the first one is the fact that the MJO is moving. It's supposed to go counterclockwise around this diagram. It take about 4 to 6 weeks to do it. And it's just moving. It's open. Nothing's keeping it stuck. I really like to see this. So overall, what we have to assess here is that we're still going to be in this pattern that's going to be like 1 week looks like this, the next week looks like that, and it's going to just flip-flop back and forth depending on where the ridges are and where the trough's set up. So we'll have a new story next week. One of the things that I think will be consistent in the longer term, the theme throughout now through the summer, is going to be this. Let's look closely at this map. We have cold water off the west coast. We call that the negative phase of the Pacific Decadal Oscillation. Now, normally, if it's colder here, spring, summer tends to be more temperate for the western United States, tends to have more precipitation, and heat and drought build in the midsection of the country. It does not have a stronger correlation with the East Coast, except to say that when the PDO stays negative, we do tend to stay wetter along the East Coast, but it's a weaker correlation. The next thing is just we have a lot of warm water that's still sitting in the hurricane main development region, Caribbean, Gulf of Mexico, and off the western Atlantic. Now you see the cooler conditions in this part of the Atlantic, but it's to the south of that I'm keeping an eye on. And our third and kind of biggest thing to discuss is El Nino, which just continues to develop very, very quickly. I mean, you go back 2 months ago, we were still talking about La Nina. That's how fast this has come on. And the forecast models, which were just released on Friday afternoon, still show an aggressive transition to El Nino by probably mid to late summer. What I mean by that is the ocean temperatures are warming, the trade winds are weaker, the jet stream responds, and that's what's going to influence our weather in North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia. Now, this could be a strong one. Right now, if you took the ensemble average, the European model is pumping this thing up over 2 degrees C above average. So this would rival some of the strongest El Nino events in history, like 82-83, 97-98, and 2015-16. So we're going to watch this one very, very carefully. But as it stands, the models are using this developing El Nino as the most dominant signal for summer. And it won't be. It's just not how it will actually be when the time gets there, but that's how the models are designed. They're going to respond to the biggest forcing. So this is what they're doing. What I want you to look at here, before I go back to ocean temperatures, is I want you to see the response in the model in the atmosphere, specifically the blues in this area. Now, that's not representing colder than normal. That's actually representing lower pressure than normal. Now, this is the Bermuda High, okay? And if the Bermuda High is weakened, maybe because of El Nino, we need to know that. Because if it's weakened and then ill-positioned, that's a drought signal for the Carolinas, Virginia, Georgia. That's a drought signal. So there it is in June, still weaker in July, still weaker in August. And I don't like that. And the reason, just so we understand, is that a stronger Bermuda High, if it stays out of the open ocean, just feeds in the moisture. And we need that for our daily thunderstorm events. But if it is weakened in this area, that's one thing of concern. The other thing that I want to be watching is the ocean temperatures. And if we just take a look at it, by August, interestingly enough, there's still a cold tongue here, but boy, this El Nino is raging. And as we go forward into September and October, we notice that the main development region for hurricanes, which is primarily here, but the Caribbean and Gulf, very, very warm. So let's take all of that and say, all right, model, what did you come up with in terms of precipitation? So we'll do seasonal. We'll come in here to the United States, and we're going to go back, and I want to start off here June, July, and August. Now notice in June, July, August, it still has a big part of the Corn Belt wet. It's got some of the plains wet. It's got a very weak southwestern monsoon. That's very common when there's an El Nino. But you notice we see these drier patches in this area. And what I'm just curious about on the model is that doing this because of the weaker than normal Bermuda High, maybe the odd displacement of its position maybe farther to the south. That would be one possibility. That's June, July, August. Here's July, August, September. And here is August, September, October, when we get into the heart of the hurricane season. So the model is saying hot, dry here, dry there, stormy in the middle. And I've got big question marks about this because I look at this and say, only way this happens is if we have no flow from the Bermuda High. And it's very, very rare that we have no flow from it. I think right now the model is possibly overdoing this. And what I would probably do in this case is I would expand this area to be showing near average to wetter than average precipitation. So this is key. We need to watch it carefully. And not so much as what's going on with El Nino, what's going on with the PDO, it's where's that Bermuda High going to set up. So we need to have a discussion about that almost every week as we go forward, all right? But this is your newest long-range weather forecast update. The temperatures right now, if we just look out there again, this is July, August, September. This is what the temperatures are expected to do. We are expecting warmer conditions than normal, but the heat is really going to be back here in parts of the Four Corners, the plains, stretching at times, up right here into the Pacific Northwest as well. So we've got a good look now at maybe what summer's going to hold, and we now understand what the models are doing with this El Nino. Let's finish this up with a quick 10-day forecast for the rest of the world. So let's come back to the near term here. A couple things to take note. Still, the drought gets worse in the Iberian Peninsula. The dry spring that has just recently set up, so the dry end of spring, let me rephrase that, for Ukraine and this part of Russia continues. The models did go much drier for most of South America's growing area. Normally the monsoon slows down here, but look at southern Brazil. This area needs more rain for the safrinha crop. Now, Argentina has been in drought for a very long time, and it's a terrible situation there, but they're continuing to show up drier. On the temperature side of it, take a look. There had been so much warm air in Russia. Where is it all now? Scandinavia and here over Canada, over the United States. Very mild conditions coming in. The Iberian Peninsula, though, where we have that drought, that really sharp and focused drought and heat, still very hot over the next several days here. Same thing for this part of Africa. So we have quite a bit of state of flux here, I think, with the overall behavior of the atmosphere as we're watching the end of a 3-year La Nina and the beginning of this next El Nino, which could be strong. And it's going to continue to affect things. And I'm going to tell you the top thing for me right now in terms of the global circulation is that Bermuda high. So let's watch it together, all right? I appreciate your attention. We'll talk again next week. Thanks.